Thank you for having me on.
Terrific. So let's just jump right into the numbers themselves. The one that everyone focuses on and knows about is the ratio. In the US, women make up nearly 60% of the undergraduate population at this point, while men represent about 40%, a gap that's grown steadily, as you know, since the early 1980s. And all kinds of reasons are given for the gap, from boys being disciplined more in K-12, learning differences between genders, boys not being encouraged by a teaching profession in K-12, boys being attracted to hands-on jobs that don't require a college degree. There's a long list. I would love to hear from your perspective and what you know from your research. What do you find to be the number one reason driving the gap?
Well, the main reason is what happens before college. I think it's a truism, but in this case also true, that the level of academic preparation that takes place in K-12 just explains a huge amount of what happens across a lot of these differences. And so boys are coming out of K-12 kind of in a very different place on average to girls. So if you just look at high school GPA, for example, 2/3 of the top 10% of high schoolers are girls compared to a third of boys. So you've got twice as many girls in that top decile. Now, that's obviously just one bit of the distribution, but it's a linear relationship all the way through. And so 2/3 of the bottom decile of high schoolers are boys. And so you've got a population that's already very gender skewed that colleges are looking at. And so I think a large part of it is what happens before, but it's also an opportunity, Michael, to point out that we've started, I'm sure we'll dig into this, we've started with like just the overall enrollment kind of ratio. And that's a very natural thing to think about. You sort of look around and say, look, who's here? Who isn't here, right? Just the number of bodies. But if you then look at like who goes on to get degrees, who actually complete a kind of college degree, there's a completion gap as well. And so there's two sides to this coin. One is the gender gap in enrollment, so just going to college. And then there's the gender gap in getting through college. So it's to and through where we see the gap. And by a very, very rough approximation, it looks like about half of the completion gap. In other words, the gender gap in people actually getting degrees is in enrollment, but the other half is in like the guys go, but they don't stay or they don't finish.
And what's your take on that latter piece of what's driving the completion gap?
Well, so that's also partly about just coming in less well prepared, right? So just at the average, right, the enrolling male student is just a little bit less ready, right? The whole phrase about kind of, college ready students. I like Sarah Goldrick's RAB change to that, which is we need student-ready colleges. I like that.
Yep.
But just on the average, the boys or the young men arrive just a little bit less ready than the girls. So they just need more intentional support, as you would for other groups. And the second thing is, and maybe we can get into this a little bit, but there's actually just growing evidence that the college environment, the sense of belonging, is just that the guys just don't feel quite as comfortable there, right? That could be part of it. And then I guess the last thing to say is that it looks as if guys are just a bit easier to kind of pull away with other opportunities, right? And so how good those opportunities are is another question, right? It might be that they're just a very good labor market and they just, I don't need this and I can get an amazing job without this and I'm off. It could also be that your friend has a great idea for an app that you're going to build in his garage, and that may not be such a great reason to stop out of college. And so there's probably a mixture of those.